Okay, everything's working. Good.
Yeah, apparently since I launched it from my home computer, it needed permission to record the screen. So I had to
Oh, okay.
give it permission and relaunch.
Jennifer, do you know if the charging station at the community center is working for electric cars? Unmute yourself.
You have to pay, but yeah, it works.
Okay.
I see people there parked for very, very long times.
How much do you have to pay?
I don't know, but you know, the best deal is to go up to Discovery Drive. But
Okay.
you have to walk, yeah, and charge there.
At the like where they
Innovation.
have the buses and stuff.
No, the Innovation Building.
Oh, the Innovation Building. Is that
Mhm.
free?
There's a parking lot there, and yeah, I think you can probably charge it. Well, did you just get an electric car?
I'm getting one tomorrow.
Oh, what are you getting?
A Leaf, Nissan Leaf.
Oh, so is it pure all electric?
All electric.
Oh, great. Yeah, that's what my friend, ours just goes like 25 miles. So we just plug it in at home. And
All right.
yeah, I mean, and it's just, but yeah, I think those are the fast ones, like the
Do you know
level.
if the university ones are free?
I believe, yeah, they're free.
But you have to have a parking permit.
I don't think so. Not up there.
Okay.
And definitely not on the weekends. But like there'll be an app when you get your car, there'll be an app and they'll tell you all sorts of free parking spots.
Right.
Like if you go to Willimantic, there's one by the town hall, then you can go out for dinner.
Right.
Learn the tricks of the trade.
Right.
And if you have a Tesla, what's really irritating, if you go to Manchester,
Mhm.
there's like banks and banks and banks of Tesla charging stations, but us poor people cannot access those.
Well, this week they said that you can now use the Tesla ones.
Really?
You just need an adapter and you have to pay for it.
Oh, the Tesla ones you don't have to pay for if you have a Tesla.
Right.
Yeah. Rude.
Well, I guess we can get started.
Let me
you know
start
if-
the recording. Hang on.
You know if Vera's coming?
Nope, it's recording. I don't.
Vera's
sent it.
probably coming. Vera's probably coming 1 minute from now. That would be my guess. We'll give her a minute. This was interesting that this gives us something interesting to start with, that sheet about the discussion outline. Was that a developer that wrote that?
Which
This one.
I cannot. I can't.
Meet the,
It's on page 101.
Oh, the discussion outline that was provided by the attorney for CMC Stores.
Right. But it does provide a nice outline for discussion.
So, and he and I did talk this morning. Well, I'll give you an update when we get to that.
I have eviscerated it.
Okay.
Can't wait to get to that sheet. Okay, let's start. Vera will be here momentarily, I'm sure. I called the PCC Regulatory Review Committee meeting of March 3rd to order at 10:03 a.m. with members Cooley and Aho present. And I guess we have enough people to approve the minutes. All we need is 2, right?
Yep. You were both here at the last meeting.
Yeah.
All right. I'd make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Okay, and I second it, so they're approved. I assume there's no public comment.
Nope. There's no public
And,
here. So
and the next thing would be our checklist of things we can check off to say that we're good.
So this, as I noted in the memo that I provided under potential amendments for sustainable CT, our fellow has asked us to look at several different actions to see if there's anything that we can report in terms of earning credit. And some of these you'll see we've done, others, maybe something that you want to tackle. So the first one was promoting dark skies. And we do have a draft of regulations regarding this that has not been adopted. So it's something that you could look at doing in the next year. And Jen, I'm glad Jen is here because she's much more familiar with this. But I think at this point, she's fairly comfortable that we will be in good shape without adopting new regulations unless, so
Okay.
it's something that she's comfortable we're going to get to the minimum number of points. And this isn't going to be a make or break, but we wanted to at least kind of give it to you as saying, look, if this fits in with what we want to do, great, let's tackle it. And I will also, as part of this, give you an update that the purchase order was approved for Tyche Policy Group. So we are getting a meeting set up with them to work on the scope of work and contract. So thoughts on lighting in terms of, is that something you'd like to pursue in the next several months? Again, we have done work on this regarding dark skies.
That is something we could kick that can down the road if we had to, right? Because we're going to get some points anyway.
Well, I mean,
So
if we're making I guess the way I feel about this, if we're making amendments, let's just add those to them. I mean, if that's a easy lift,
Okay.
non-controversial that we should do, right? I mean,
I'm for that.
Yeah.
but none of this should bog down.
Yeah, that's
In
what
my
I'm
opinion.
concerned about. I don't want to bog down other things that we're trying to
No,
get done.
and then we'll make that decision as it comes up. But if it bogs it down, forget it.
Move
Okay.
on. Yeah.
Do it. Boom.
Okay.
But yeah, I'd love to see the lighting. That was,
Is there anything in those new regulations that would prevent stores from shining bright lights in your face like that cigarette store at Four Corners?
I'd have to go back and look at it. I mean, those are usually interior lights.
These are exterior, aimed directly at the people. It blinds you when you're driving by on 44.
I would say one reason to think about this too is that we've had so many proposals for large multifamily complexes in areas that are not going to be used to that much light. So addressing this now might head off some complaints down the road.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah.
All right. So the next one, there are several actions that come under the next one, and I will say most of them I think are really more probably staff. So updating our LID checklist and site plan checklist is needed. So we just need to review and update those. For number 2, I actually think potentially that the South Eagleville Road Housing Opportunity District might qualify under this criteria. So it was, where we have expedited permitting and as of right site plan approval process. The only thing that concerns me is it says that meet sustainable design standards, and I'm like, it's expedited permitting, and to me, it's for affordable housing. Therefore, I think that's sustainable. So, we'll see whether or not that qualifies.
Yeah.
Well,
the next one.
The good thing is that what we'll do, if we do that in our pre-application, if we can do that by March 30th, or then we can find out what we have to do.
Yep.
To do that.
So the next, that's something that is we look at, and we'll talk about kind of later on in terms of expedited permitting and see if that's something we want to work in as we do regulations. The next item has to do with the pre-application review. And, so I think when Thomas looked at this, he was probably looking at the policy the commission has. The reality is that we actually do what number 3 is. It's just not written down to say, so we routinely, as part of pre-application meetings on projects, pull in building, fire, engineering, and have those meetings before it ever comes to you. So I think, again, this is going to be one of those that, as we're doing updates, if I just need to add that we will, include other departments in the regulations that already include encourage a pre-application process, then let's get the points, and so we'll go from there. And it actually says it's a written policy, so this is something we could probably do without
Regulation change.
amending the regulations. Yeah. Town processes for permitting. We need to update the permit guide. We haven't updated it since it was adopted. So that's overdue. So I think that's something that we'll have to do, I think, by the end of March. I got to make a to-do list for stuff that has to be done by the end of March.
I love the
Well, you
permitting
can wait
guide.
till August for that one. I mean, as long
We
as
can wait
we're
until
gonna-
August, Jen?
Yeah, I mean, as long as we're gonna update it, then I don't see that's. And if you can
Okay.
mark it up, Thomas is good at, he's very adept at, he could do it in Publisher.
All right. So the next one is for solar permitting, and this one I would say is a little bit more complicated because you have to do A through E to earn 10 points. And most of this is not related to the commission. You would only be involved with section A, which is to review zoning requirements and identify restrictions that intentionally or unintentionally prohibit solar PV development. So that is, everything else has to do with checklists and training. I don't know that B through E are something we're going to be able to do. Just from conversations with the building department, that their feeling is when those permits get held up, it's not a building issue. It's typically something else. So I don't know that we would get 10 points on this. I think we can, I think some of these things are good to pursue, but I think this should probably just come off our list as a way to get points, because I don't think it's going to happen. So
Yep.
When we hire Tyke, I think these are things we can give them and they can just incorporate.
Right.
And we're not going to worry about departments that we can't control and things, but then we'll be ready when.
Well, and I think it's and just so everyone understands, one of the challenges is we have an electronic permitting system. We've tried to make it, it's something that applies to everything. And one of the things that this is asking you to do is to have a special solar application, which just does not make
Too hard.
sense.
It goes backwards. Yeah. And I was going to say, I think given the amount of solar that's already in our town, I don't think we have a big issue with getting solar permitted. So even beyond getting points, it's not necessarily an area where our town has an issue to work on.
Right. So the next item is under promoting effective parking management. And there are 3 options, and they request that you choose one per cycle. So with regard to the third bullet, I think to Jen's point, we have a provision that relates to what they call unbundling of parking, and that's the residential parking credit process, where in order to qualify, so I think we can submit that for the end of March and say, here's what we've done and see if we get credit. I do think that the parking minimums need to be revised, and that's something that we would ask Tyke to look at. They're definitely high. For some particular uses. I think that the context sensitive may be something that is appropriate, trying to do some research, but the basics that I could come up with is that it seems like instead of saying, if you're doing an office use, it requires 4 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet in every zone, you may say, oh, if you're in this zone, we're going to let you have less parking because there's transit available. So, some of those, we may be able to pull in for example, Storage Center, that they have their own parking standards based on, the location, the availability of transit, the ability to walk, the mixed use nature, things like that. So I think for this, at least starting out by just putting what we have, and let's see if we get points for it. If not, again, I do think we should look at the minimums and, maybe the context sensitive, and you can have a discussion about maximums as we go through the regulation update with Tyke.
And I think Storage Center is a good example of parking that's almost completely used, and that's what we want. We don't want a lot of extra parking.
I think it's interesting that, that in the project that you just approved was asking for reductions. So we're not seeing people that are going, I want to build a sea of parking. They're coming in saying, I want to do less than what you would normally be required to do. So,
And if there's a slight shortage, that's better than a huge surplus.
all right. And then the last one is incentive housing zones. So this is the one that probably has the most information, I think would probably be the hardest lift in the next few months. And, unless Tyche could take this on, is part of what they're doing. But essentially, incentive housing zones were created by the legislature. I think it was before I started with the town. And my understanding was that when this was first presented to the commission, they said, we don't need this, and decided not to pursue it. But essentially, the idea is that you're facilitating affordable housing because at least 20% of the units have to be set aside to low and moderate income households for at least 30 years. It has to be in a location that's consistent with the state plan of conservation development or conservation development policies plan. And you have to allow the housing with no special permit. It has to be a site plan approval as of right. And then it has minimum density requirements. And there is a provision that says you have to get DOH approval to use something lower than that as a small community. So this lists out all the things that you would need to meet. It does allow you to have some design standards for the IHC. So if this is something, that you would be interested in, I think that's something we can ask Tyche to work on. And this may, as I was looking at this may come in with some of the transitional zones as well, that you're basically, and the reason it's called an incentive housing zone is because in theory, and I don't know if the budget is there to back it up, that communities that have adopted these zones and had them approved by DOH, when these projects get built, you can actually get money. So basically for creating the affordable housing units. But again, I don't know if there's any funding actually for that part of the program at this point.
Without any money, there's not much incentive, but
well, I mean,
we can make our own rules. Yeah.
Well, the incentive here is, I would also argue that from the affordable housing plan, and given the interest in creating affordable housing, the incentive is also, if you adopt an IHZ, you are letting developers know you're taking that special permit out of the process and saying, if you do this and you're doing at least 20% affordable, then it's a site plan. It
just makes it easier to develop.
Mhm.
It provides a level of certainty, which may help facilitate and make someone more comfortable and go, well, if my option is a special permit where I have to provide 10% of affordable units and I don't know if I'm going to get it, or a site plan, and as long as I meet all the requirements, I'm going to get approval, and I do 20% affordable, that may be something that they consider.
Okay. Yeah.
So I have a question, Linda. Could we put that incentive housing zone like on top of Halinko?
Oh, that's interesting.
Because they have more land, and they have
use it as a tool for redevelopment for some of those not very dense places.
Before we do this, I'm sure you're aware that through the ARPA, can you talk about how we're thinking of funding the Honey Lodge Road neighborhood plan?
So one of the things that if you've been following the council, and actually we're going to talk about this on Monday night. So one of the initial proposals that the town manager put forward back in December for use of the American Rescue Plan Act funding was extension of sewer service over to Hunting Lodge Road, and including the Goodwin School. And the initial feedback that he had received from some of the council members was that they really, I think they thought that was premature, that there was concern about extending infrastructure without a plan for how the school was going to be reused. And, what are we opening the door to? And I think Jennifer and I both agreed that, and I will say, to give Jen credit, she's been pushing this plan for years. So we actually, as part of our CIP request this year, had put in, as part of our budget request, funding to do a neighborhood plan for the West Campus, Hunting Lodge Road areas, so that to stabilize neighborhoods and say, okay, what do we want to do here? We're continuing to see rental conversions. How do we stabilize this neighborhood? How do we bring back, owner occupancy? How do we do some of the middle housing that, everyone is interested in, doing a plan and regulations and getting buy-in from the community as a whole. So one of the things that the town manager did was, because that, we had basically proposed that as part of our budget, which happened after the entire, he had gotten the feedback, or around the same time he was getting the feedback about not doing that sewer extension. So the current proposal from the town manager includes funding, using American Rescue Plan Act funding to do the neighborhood plan. So it's something that they are seeking public feedback on that at a public hearing on the 14th. So that's why it's on your agenda for Monday, so that we can talk about it if the commission wants to weigh in on any of the proposals there. So
yeah, that would make it a lot easier to do the middle housing. We have sewer and water, or sewer alone. Well, it already has water, right?
Holinko has sewer and water, I believe.
So the line would go to the south toward.
It actually, well, Holinko has, if we're talking about Holinko specifically, and again, we're not, the sewer extension has been taken kind of off the table. That would be a future item. They're not looking at that with the rescue plan funding right now. But Holinko has, their sewer is actually connected from the back of the property. It goes through Celeron over to the treatment plant. So it's not in Hunting Lodge Road.
So they're already connected. Yeah.
Yep.
Is Celeron connected too?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that, well, I'm going to speak sort of as maybe not as a staff person, but I think to deal with the incentive housing zone, we need to have a broader plan and have community engagement and have an understanding of really what we want in places.
I completely agree. This is a big deal, and it matters to do it thoughtfully.
So I think this is the one that was like, this is going to take time. It's not, it's not something that is going to be a quick fix or overnight.
So the town council is approving someone to do a plan for Hunting Lodge?
It is in a list of proposals from the town manager. They have not made any decisions on how to fund it. I will say, in the presentation at the last council meeting, based on feedback the manager gotten from individual counselors, it doesn't seem like that project made it into the high priority list of all the projects. So they're trying to figure out, prioritize projects to move forward. We do have to present a plan for spending, I think, at least half of our allocation by the end of April. So they're trying to identify what that first half of spending is going to be.
Can we, as a commission, write an advocacy letter to the council on behalf of
that is why it's on the agenda on Monday evening, in case the commission wants to weigh in officially.
Okay.
That sounds like something that we do and not the town council does.
Well,
Except
they have to fund it.
They're the
funding it.
Right.
So we can say, please fund this. We think it would be a good project. It's under our purview, but we can't.
Right.
Do the
Please
funding.
fund us.
Well,
Please fund this project.
Yeah. But I mean, is there some other entity that would be doing the project that we're not don't have any connection with?
No.
So
It's
basically,
this is just a funding source. Again, we requested this initially through the CIP. And I think, one of the things you could also say is, if you don't see this as a priority for ARPA, could you please include it in your capital improvement program using other funding, such as pilot. So that you're just starting to advocate for what you're looking for.
I have one question. The Planning and Zoning Commission has never weighed in on budgetary requests before.
They wait.
Should. I mean, if we're fun, you guys are not just the zoning commission, you're the planning commission, and planning takes time and money.
Yeah,
and
we should be
capacity.
doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
so you do. Yeah, I mean, and you do typically weigh in on the CIP, but you're right. We haven't done budgetary requests before. But that's something anyone can weigh in. There's public hearing on the budget. If the commission wants to comment, you definitely have that ability.
Okay.
All right. So numbers 2 and 3, I think, number 2, we're just going to give Thomas our regulations that say we allow accessory apartments by zoning permit, which should get us 20 points. And then number 3, we're going to give him the definition of family. And I'm hoping that also qualifies. So it's got the alternative living arrangements. We have a maximum, it says pursuant to your maximum occupancy. So I think we should be just 2 and 3 alone should be 40 points for us, would be my assessment. So we'll get that to Thomas for our pre-application in March.
Cool. Good work, guys.
Good.
So, okay. Moving on to part B, transitional districts. And it looks like we did have someone join us.
Is that Chuck? Chuck, is that you?
They're muted, whoever it is.
So I did talk to, so Paul, I know you had asked
Sorry
about the
about that.
discussion.
Who is?
Yes.
Sorry, I was muted. I'm on my phone. Yeah, this is Chuck Lee here. Hope everyone's doing well.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks, Chuck. So for transitional districts, the information that's in the packet is the same as last time, and just wanted to kind of have a conversation about how you want to approach this. I did speak with Joe Williams, who is Chuck's legal counsel, earlier this morning about kind of the path forward. And our discussion was basically along the lines of, if the commission is really interested in form-based, they would need to get some other assistance. He's an attorney, he's used to writing regulations, but not dealing with form. So if that's something, and essentially what I told him is, I think form was definitely my takeaway from your last meeting, that was going to be a key component of this. And I think that it's something that we would also be providing to our consultant as we look on rewriting the regulations. But it's really going to be a matter of timing. That I don't know that, that they may be on a much quicker schedule than we are when it comes to creating these districts. So one of the things that I did look at in preparing for this meeting is looking at whether or not, do we want to do this as a base zoning district? Do we want to do it as a planned development district where somebody would come in? Think something similar to Store Center, because where you come in, you basically enable. We could create the enabling legislation for a special development district, and then someone would need to come in to map it with a preliminary master plan, design standards, things of that nature, which would be another way to approach this. So, and I know, Paul, you were very excited to get to this item on the agenda. So
yeah, so there's a nice outline for discussion on page 101. And so some of the things I might change if I were writing it would be a lower building height. I would go to 35 instead of 40. 35 is what we have in residential areas. The other thing I would change is with our form-based idea, the density might not be as high as 10 to 12. I would be thinking more like 5 to 6, about half of that much, and no apartments. This would be duplexes or houses. I'm not opposed to having small scale commercial, but I think only on a major road, like 195. If we're talking about some other transitional zone, I would prefer to have all residential. But I think in this particular example that we're talking about, you could have in the front some small scale commercial and then the middle housing behind. But smaller scale and less density, even though we don't talk about density per se.
So, and that was gonna be one of my questions, Paul, because some of the stuff that the other documents that we provided in terms of missing middle housing, it actually encourages you not to establish a density number, and instead
Right.
says, establish your building footprint. And say it can't be a lot wider than this, deeper than this, and a
Right.
height, which they recommend a maximum of 2.5 stories. And then, but they stay away from the density because they basically say within that footprint, put however many number of units you want, so that it's more, you're kind of you're controlling the form and the scale, the massing, the rhythms of solids and voids, and you're not focusing as much on how many units are there.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. But in the end, at the end of the day, you could go back and look, oh, what was that density? And it turns out to be about 8 is a sweet spot.
Possibly. I think I like the idea of what you're saying, Linda, because we're talking in Mansfield about dealing with steep slopes, with dealing with wetlands, with dealing with all of these site-specific challenges, and that would allow a lot more freedom for design. And if we're basically doing this on a form basis, we're controlling the form, which is what people are concerned about, right? But not the density. We'd love to get as much density as possible, and I suspect that most developers would as well, right? And so that would allow for it to be more of a site-specific kind of metric.
Right, as long as you're doing the form and the setbacks, then go
I
for it.
think, and parking is always going to be a control in terms of what you can fit in.
Parking, landscaping, buffering, design.
Now I noticed that there's a minimum lot area. I think if we want to do something for the entire town, I don't think we need a minimum lot area.
I was going to say that too, but then again, I don't know.
Could be
if you want
140,000 square foot lot.
Yeah, if you want, infill, then you don't want a minimum lot size, right?
Right.
I mean, this could potentially be broader than, could potentially apply to quite small areas, right?
Yeah, it could apply to places on Hunting Lodge, for example.
Can we incentivize? I also think incentivizing redevelopment somehow. I mean, and I don't want to say like, okay, we get redevelopment and they want to like triple the density, and triple the and I guess we're not talking about density, but triple the land coverage. That's not. I don't know that that's the greatest thing for our town.
Well, I mean, do we have regulations about maximum lot coverage? Because that could take that into account, right? I mean, that's one of the things that we were talking about at Circa as a tool for resilience. If you're trying to avoid having too much non-permeable paving, that's one way to think about it.
But if we're talking about a very small area of sewer and water, then maybe we don't want to put all our wild land there. Put it somewhere else. I mean, we actually do want to cover those areas.
Yeah, it's true. But doesn't it also, I mean, doesn't the sewer and water also sort of self-regulate itself? Because you can propose whatever you want, but if it's not going to be approved for the amount of sewer and water capacity, it's not going to happen. Is that right?
What do you mean by?
You mean the university will tell us?
If the capacity doesn't exist for sewer and water, then you're not getting your project.
Well, or just even
so if there's not capacity to serve, then
and stormwater doesn't work.
Uh-oh.
Linda's freezing.
Everyone's frozen.
Oh, no.
I'm not frozen.
Nobody's.
Okay, it's me. Hold on a second.
Yeah.
When you look at a place like South Eagleville, where that new place is for the pottery,
Oh,
there's a lot of buildings around there and no sewer. You know, so even places without water and sewer,
but those couldn't be built today.
couldn't be built today, but maybe something almost like that could be built
Well, I
today.
think what you're talking about is a neighborhood village, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even like Mansfield Center,
Mhm.
Marrow, those are villages that where
Yeah.
we do have those types of things. So how do you, in the POCD, we talk about replicating
Mhm.
those neighborhood village areas and neighborhood business districts.
Sure, but without water and sewer, you can't build it.
It's hard. It's hard without the water and sewer. But
Can't do it.
some places we do have water and sewer, so we got to take
Oh.
advantage of that as best we can.
Mhm.
So I think it's, yeah, and the maximum lot coverage, I think we've also talked about that in the past. And one of the things is, from a stormwater standpoint, it's disconnecting. It's not so much the impervious cover, it's the disconnection, and I'll have to see if anyone has ever regulated, a limit on connected versus disconnected impervious cover.
And it's going to be interesting as we see these new developments, right? These are pretty high tech. I think
Yeah.
they're high tech, right? I'm not an engineer.
As far as the stormwater
Yeah.
management. Yeah.
So what happens in 25 years?
Yeah, exactly. I think that they're best practices for the moment, but I don't think that, from the work that I've read and what I know, I don't think anything out there is being built to take account for climate change unless it is specifically in the code that they have to. And nobody's doing that. They should, but it's pricey and it's also an uncertainty. But it's going to come down to the fact that you're not going to be able to get insurance if you are not taking into account climate change risk, especially if you're in an area that has a significant flood risk or significant precipitation-based flood risk. But all of that's going to play out very slowly. That's all going to play out slowly. And frankly, for our town, there isn't a lot of regulation that we could justify from a climate base without more site-specific data, if that makes any sense. Like, we all know that this is an issue, but showing it's an issue right here is a difference. It's kind of different, if that makes any sense.
Yep. All right. So I think I have a lot of notes, Paul, from
Good.
from the markup. And again, I think this is something that we'll kind of be packaging together to give to Tyche and say, and they may want to have a conversation with you that says, all right, like, as we create these new districts, same with the next item on the agenda, the single family residential districts, what are we trying to get to, and just let them take the ball and run with it. And they may need to bring on some other design folks. They may need to subcontract with somebody on the design piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as far as single family residential districts, one of the details is the uses part, where we have it all divided up between different uses.
Yep.
And even today, uses that are permitted need a certain number of acres to do. And so you're not going to put a school on 90,000 feet. So I don't see why we can't use all of the uses, even if we're talking about a 20,000 foot lot, because you can't put a school there, but you could say you can put a school there. I'm not sure why we need to separate that out into different zones. If you had enough of those 20s together, you could make a school.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that maybe we're making too fine a distinction between RE,
The
R90
different,
and
well, and I think
R90.
the
Yeah,
the R20, R90, RA, and R90.
yeah, that, I mean, depending on this, how much land you got, you could do this, that, or the other, but if you don't have the land, you just can't do it anyways, but you could permit it for everyone.
I think the distinction, when I've looked at this, I think it's always been, when I look at the wet zoned R20 and R90, is they're really established neighborhoods. Single family homes, typically, you know, the R20s, you know, those actually, while some are half acre lots, some are, you know, I think we also have like Circle Drive, which was built in the 50s. So those are like 8,000 to 11,000 square foot lots. And so when I've looked at the regulations in the past, I think it was always on okay, the reason we have a much more limited set of uses here is because introducing some of these other things into that established neighborhood that maybe on smaller lots, maybe a little bit more intense than they're prepared for. I think if it's a direction you want to go, I do think we need to have, you know, be prepared to have some public conversations about it, because I think you may get some pushback from residents who say, what do you mean you're going to say that I can? So keep in mind, you're thinking of a scale of a school of the new elementary school. Someone else could come in and say, oh, I want to do a school for 20 kids.
Yeah.
In this house, and is that really something that you want, you know, in a neighborhood? Obviously, well and septic would be a limiting factor,
Like the
but just
Montessori
something.
schools we already have in neighborhoods. Like the Montessori schools we already have.
Yeah, but I think a lot of those are also, they're in less dense neighborhoods. So again,
I guess we do need to go through the uses one
I
by
think
one.
if I just think it's going to be a conversation that folks who are
Yeah.
in some of those smaller neighborhoods would be
Yeah.
surprised to get something that says, oh yeah, you know, someone can come in and put some of, you know, some of these other uses there.
Yeah,
But
no,
I
you're
think it's
right.
worth it.
You're
It's
right.
worth a discussion. I just, you know, kind of going with the, you know, how do we move this forward? And, you know, what do you, this one might be one that you have to kind of take in nibbles over time, or do you want to just tackle everything you want to do in one shot and just be prepared to make adjustments along the way?
Good question.
Pull off the Band-Aid, do it all at once.
All right.
I think it's just it's going to get bogged down no matter what, and it's better to try to do more than to assume you're not going to get much done. Try to move things along.
I'd agree.
Yeah, and just for the record too, I want to point out that I put 2 links in the chat. One is to the Sustainable City Code. I'm not sure if you've seen this before, but it's a website-based reference for different municipal actions that towns can take to increase sustainability, with examples from towns that have done things like this. And there are all kinds of different things. And then the other link was to the New York government's model local laws to increase resilience. And it's another website-based model code that has all kinds of different types of things that one can do for various resilience purposes, with models and examples of towns that have done that. And this comes out of the New York State Planning Office.
Thanks for sending those, Luann.
Yep.
I just pulled up the Sustainable City Code.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I was in law school, we actually wrote parts of that. So I wrote a couple of those, but or helped write a couple of those, I should say. But
Wow.
Great.
yeah, it was a neat project.
All right. So the other item that I have for you today, and I apologize, is just under future meetings. So on Monday evening, the council voted to go back to in-person meetings effective March 14th. As part of their motion, I haven't seen the full written version. There were lots of edits as they were doing this, but it was essentially that committees, you know, or they're not asking all committees to do that, that if they want to continue to meet virtually, They have that ability until April, unless the statutes are amended. So I just wanted to talk with you to see if you have a preference in terms of how you want to do these meetings moving forward, since the next one will be on March 17th.
I am completely biased because I have meetings packed before and after this. So for me, virtual is the best option. I'd be very limited in my ability to participate otherwise. However, I recognize that if we're having a meeting where we're looking at maps in particular, that's really helpful to be in person.
Okay.
That's the most fun one. We have a big map and we're pouring over the map.
So meetings with maps in person, otherwise virtual.
Could we do a hybrid where we have some online and some
Sure.
in person? Is that a possibility?
It is. It's a little bit more work for us.
I think it's less work for Linda if we meet in person, Luann.
Okay.
Oh, I would say.
No,
no,
it's
no.
less work for us if we meet virtually.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
much,
right,
much,
okay,
much less.
okay, all right.
And also, I mean, for me, looking at maps, I'd much rather be sitting at my computer because I can quickly
in when you
look
want,
things
yeah.
up. And I have, yeah, it's going to be hard for me to not
Yep.
have Google right there to, and like
I guess-
web GIS and all sorts of
Yep,
things.
yep, I get that. I guess what I would say is that if I have a paper copy map in front of me, then I'm content no matter where I am. So if there's
Well-
going to be a map, I could just pick one up before the meeting, if that's possible.
If we do mapping, we'll figure something out.
Yeah.
But so it sounds like if we're just doing conversations and regulations, then
Like the
We're
one
good with
today
the-
is perfectly fine to do the way we did it.
okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Now, what about the PCC meetings, the regular meetings?
Those will probably be going to in person,
In person?
because I
how-
think
How soon?
starting with March 21st.
Oh, okay,
So
the next meeting.
Yep, we'll talk about that.
Oh.
There is a lot of strides have been made technology wise in our conference rooms over the pandemic. There is the ability to do hybrid meetings. I will tell you that before we tackle that, we're actually going to get some training this afternoon from IT. I guess the Board of Ed has been doing hybrid meetings for a while. I am leery of doing the hybrid. I think before we would ever tackle a hybrid meeting with a public hearing, we have to get really comfortable with it on meetings without a public hearing, because it's really like running two meetings in one. And we have a lot riding on these meetings, so we need to make sure that we're doing it properly. And to my
So
knowledge, I don't think
Hybrid would mean some people aren't there and some are?
correct.
Okay, yeah, that sounds messy.
So it's
Yeah.
I think I've seen some, again, they've said the Board of Ed has been doing it. I know the council has done at least a few where they've had a few members who couldn't be there in person. They've participated virtually, or done it from different locations. So oh, I take that back. I don't think that I think it was, I'm just remembering someone who was in a conference room. That's what it was. He was in a conference room using the camera that's on the TV in the conference room, and if they couldn't zoom in, that's what it was. So I don't think they've done hybrid. I think that's really been the Board of Ed. But again, I think to my understanding, it's not like we're going to have an IT staff person that can handle all the hybrid pieces.
Yeah,
So that means it falls on Sandy, Jeline, Jennifer, and myself to juggle the content of the meeting and also making sure that we're figuring this out. But that being said, I know other organizations have gone to hybrid and are doing it and have found a way. So if that's something that members are interested in, we can try it. But again, I think just like when we went from in person to virtual at the beginning of the pandemic, we pushed off a big public hearing until we had a good handle on the virtual meeting, because we were not prepared to, kind of go into that blind, and we wanted to have a good handle on the platform before we started saying, yes, you can do this. I mean, there are benefits to the hybrid. It would allow consultants, applicants to be
Mhm.
able to testify and not have to come out. When it comes to our own peer review consultants that we hire, I will tell you, most of the bids that we have gotten in the last 2 years assume virtual meetings. And if they have to come to a meeting, they're going to charge more. At the end of the day, that cost is the applicants, not yours, but still something to be aware of. So I know that the discussion at the council level was particularly with regard to the hybrid is that it'll allow staff to participate from home. So for people who are only there for one item, and as a staff person, I do greatly appreciate that, so that I'm not spending all night at town hall to speak on one item.
I would love to see the town council support that financially, that because that seems to really be the limitation, because I do all kinds of meetings like this at the state level and national too, where things are hybrid, and it's great, but you have to have a dedicated staff person who is simply managing the ins and outs of it. You really do, to make it work properly. I'd love to see the town council fund a position for that, because I think it would just increase everybody's ability to communicate, because I don't think there's really very good evidence that it's increased public participation. That seems to actually be pretty steady between in-person and virtual meetings, the number of people that are participating, but I think it's changing who is participating, if that makes any sense. It's not necessarily we're getting more people, it's just we're getting a different set of people. So maintaining that option, I think, would be a really good engagement. So
That's great. That's a letter, Luann.
Okay.
Because that I feel the same way. I mean, we always have to think about my little article that I read the other weekend and passed along to you is who's missing. We have to be thinking about that all the time.
Yep.
Who's missing from these conversations.
Yep. Yeah. And, it's been a real boon in many ways that I've been able to participate in things in other states I simply wouldn't have been able to do. And we've been able to contact experts and have people come talk to us and participate in things that those are perspectives we simply wouldn't have been able to get if we had to fly people in or whatever.
Linda, doesn't the council and Board of Ed have a dedicated person? I believe they do.
Yeah, so I talked to Jamie a long time about this the other day, and he believes that it could not be done by somebody that had other responsibilities during the meeting time.
Not at all.
Yeah, so, we'd have to take one of us until that position was funded and dedicate them to the booth. That would be the only way that we could run it efficiently.
Jolene, what doesn't the council and Board of Ed, they have someone in that booth, and are they running that hybrid component?
They are, yes.
Okay, that's like,
well, I don't know about the council. The council has somebody in there to run it regardless.
right.
Board of Ed definitely has someone in there to run it hybrid.
It's not a full-time position either. It's they were using Parks and Rec staff, at a rate of, I don't know.
Yeah, Louis was in there for Board of Ed last week.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
that's so I think that, again, that this is going to be on your agenda for Monday, and maybe this is, again, another
letter.
I'm actually wondering, we don't have the town manager's proposed budget yet, but once we do, we can put that on the agenda so that the commission can identify if there's anything you want to advocate for or add. But I think, given that the council just made this decision on Monday, this is a good time for you to come and say, look, we think that this is good, but we would need we need money for a staff person. I will tell you that was not in my budget because I was not thinking about hybrid meetings when I was preparing my budget. So
it's an average of what, 6 hours a month, Linda, for PCC?
We actually asked for this a couple of years ago, and it was back when we were being pushed to televise the meetings. And I think it was like, please don't, no, we don't, it was not a priority. We were televising, but it was to get someone in there to do what they do at council, which is they zoom in on whoever's talking. And I think the commission at that time is like, no, that's okay. We're good not being zoomed in on. And, you know, so but it was, yeah, it's like
That's probably Joanne.
Temporary line item. I forget. It might have been Kent, because I feel like one year it was, no, we don't want that. We don't want to zoom in. And then it was like, well, why don't we have this? I'm like, can you guys?
This seems like a good use of, you know, COVID infrastructure funds, frankly.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
it's one of the things that you can say
Yep.
moving forward from this pandemic is a bonus, you know, it's a plus. It's something we've learned that we can improve our situation going forward with.
And it's one thing that has changed because of COVID.
Yeah, and change
Yep.
for the better, I think. I mean, it just
It's
gives
an
more
equity
flexibility.
thing,
Yep.
100%.
Mhm.
No, I think it definitely has made, I know we had a former EDC member that I think we literally crammed into the conference room at MCC because it was the only place he could get childcare.
Yep.
And so we
exactly.
had like 10 people huddled in this room because he's like, I'm not allowed to leave the building
Mhm.
when my kids are in MCC childcare. It's the only way I can attend this meeting. And, you know, whereas now, you know, the vice chair has her, you know, her kids may be in the background because she has that flexibility to do it from home.
Yep.
So,
Good. Well, we will ask for that money.
all right. Looks like I'll be preparing a couple of motions on those items to authorize the chair to submit requests.
Excellent, excellent. So
All right, anything
I
else?
think we're done for today. Luann, you like the trees I'm planting?
Yeah, what are you doing? Distracting me from my work every moment. I'm like, what's
I
happening?
put in
Okay,
3 huge trees yesterday.
Yeah, I saw that. Now, are you just moving them from one part of your yard to another?
No,
or
no,
were-
they're coming from far away.
Oh, so brand new trees. So were you taking anything out? No.
I've been taking stuff out over the
Yeah,
years.
well,
Yeah.
I'm aware.
Yeah, yeah. No, this is just adding now.
But it's just adding. Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah, nice.
So the Gantt house is disappearing from your view.
Yeah, I noticed because I took an early picture in the morning when I was watching to see how deeply stuck that truck was going to get. And when I looked in the afternoon, I was like, wait a minute. Yeah, very interesting.
Don't tell Jennifer I got a truck stuck in my backyard.
Well, all I could think of was, oh, Jennifer gets to come out and re-inspect when you fix all of the drainage.
Oh, do you have to refix it?
Oh, everything's fine. Just a little mud.
I'll send you the pictures, Jennifer.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll be fine.
Okay, thank you all.
Thanks,
See you on
everybody.
Monday, right? Monday, 6 o'clock.
Yep.
Okay.
Bye,
See you then.
everyone.